Welcome to the Organisational Inclusionist. I'm your host, Grace Mosuro. In this podcast series, we'll be delving deep into the pressing issues surrounding equality, diversity, and inclusion in both the workplace and the broader world. My goal is to foster understanding, inspire change, and amplify the voices of those advocating for a more inclusive and equitable society. Throughout this series, I'll be engaging in candid discussions with leaders, experts, activists, and changemakers from various fields. We'll explore the challenges, successes, and evolving landscapes of equality, diversity, and inclusion. From dismantling systematic biases to promoting equal opportunities for all, we'll touch on a broad range of topics. But we won't stop at discussing problems. We'll actively seek out solutions and actionable steps to drive positive change. Our aim is to inspire and empower you, our listeners, to take an active role in making the world a better place for everyone. This is the Organisational Inclusionist. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Organisational Inclusionist. Today I am joined by the wonderful Agatha. Agatha, I'm going to get you to give us a proper introduction. So we had a conversation a few weeks back and it was so enlightening, and I found you to be so inspirational. Your story in particular is really inspirational. And one of the things that I'm keen to do with this podcast is to share real life stories of people on their journey as individuals in the UK, in the world, but particularly giving visibility and sharing marginalized grouped stories. So, you know, what your journey has been like, any kind of key takeaways and just advice that you have for people following behind you, because I think one of the biggest things that we need to do as professionals in the world today is really just leave a world that's better for future generations to come. So I absolutely love what you've been doing, and I think it was we just had to get you on a podcast episode just to share that story. So before we get stuck in, Agatha, would you mind just giving our listeners a bit of an intro into you and your background?
Yeah, no, of course. And thank you for that intro. And I enjoyed our conversation last time too. So I'm Agatha Nortley-Meshe. I am a GP in South London. And really my main function is as a clinical leader. So throughout the years, I've been in medical director roles or clinical lead roles, mainly in healthcare. So in CCGs back in the day, commissioning organisations in trusts, NHS trusts, so provider organisations, and then also currently now I work for NHS England in a leadership role around primary care. So that's kind of what I do. But obviously, aside from that, a mother, a sister, a daughter, a friend, and I think it's all kind of the all parts of you really. And one of my key passions is around, and I think that's part of what we spoke about last time, really supporting other people, and particularly other women, and particularly other women of colour, in living and surviving, and within the environments where we have to live and work, and being our whole selves in those environments as well. So yeah, that's what I do, and that's what I love.
Amazing, thank you. So I'll edit that bit out.
That's all right. Bless you.
So personally, I have never had a Black GP. So I think what would be interesting is to kind of hear your journey. Like, what made you decide to be a GP? How did you get into that career?
So that's interesting, because most people start with, I always wanted to be a doctor, and I did not. I really did not want to be a doctor. I think I was in defiance. So obviously I was young, I was clever, I was good at science. My dad was a GP. He's retired now, but he was a GP. He's got 4 girls, and one of us had to be a doctor. It was like, that one of us had to be a doctor. And my older sister became a pharmacist because she thought medicine was harder, which I disagree with. I think, I spent a day working with her in her pharmacy, and I was like, oh my God, no, that's really and then there was me. And then there's this sister after me who's a film producer, and then there's the youngest sister who's a dentist. So I was kind of, because my older sister didn't decide to be a doctor, I thought, oh gosh, now it's down to me, I've got to do it. But I had lots of other interests. I'm actually very arty. In fact, we're all very arty. Myself and my sisters and my family are quite arty. So I used to be a singer, and I used to do drama arts and things, and performances and all of that. And I really enjoyed that side, and I wanted to explore that side. And I could do medicine, but I didn't want to do it. But I think part of not wanting to do it is because I was being told to, and I felt I need to do it in my way. So got to the end of my A levels. I did science ones just because I could, and I didn't know what else to do. And I did those, and I got the grades. But then I took a year out, and I really explored during that year. I kind of used that time to be a bit more reflective. Did loads of singing, loads of acting. Just went around, did lots of things. Went abroad, and one of the things I did do was a Black Studies course. And I think when I did that, I realized that firstly, everything I'd known about Black history is what you learn in Black History Month and slavery and the civil rights movement. And I think when I did that course, I learned about the civilizations that existed before that. I learned about the impact of what's happened over the centuries and how that's impacted on us as particularly Black people and how that's impacted on social, economic, etc. And then I kind of thought about the role of doctors, and actually that they're a trusted member of society, that people come to us, and actually we need people within the medical field that understand us, and that look at things from a different perspective. And so it occurred to me that we do need Black doctors, and I could be one, and actually in doing that I'll be able to give something back to my community. And so I decided to do it, but on my own terms. So that's basically how I chose to become a doctor. So it's a very long answer. How I decided to become a GP is slightly different. I think when in medical school you get to see all specialties, and I went to obviously do we call them rotations, but you did rotations in different specialties. You got to see different things, and I found everything really, really interesting, and I couldn't focus on one specialty that I'd be like, right, I want to do that. I think the other thing is I was very interested in the whole person, and I found that when you super specialize, sometimes you can only focus on that bit because that's what you know, and you know it really well. But actually I was quite content with knowing a little bit about everything, but actually building relationships with people and families, and that long-term end-to-end relationship that you build with people as their GP. And that it's a different kind of trust, there's a different kind of relationship, and there's also you never know what's coming. So no clinic is the same. You get, you can get people come in for good things. People come in because, they're going on holiday and they want to discuss things around medications and vaccinations and things like that. People come in because, for, new babies and pregnancy and related things, and you're kind of cooing at this baby, and doing that as well, doing the baby checks. And obviously people come in with, illness and disease, and you support people through that. And it's a life journey type relationship. So I think those were the things that drew me to general practice. The other thing around it is the ability to have more of a portfolio career and not just do clinics. So obviously I do clinical leadership, I've done teaching and training, I try and do lots of different things, and I think general practice allowed for that too. So those were the main reasons that I decided to go in that direction.
See, that is so amazing. And I think, we never really get insights into other people's careers, and listening to that has made me want to be a GP. But I know I'm not
you can do it.
I don't know. I can't.
We need you. We need more.
I know. But I think it's weird as well, because you were just telling the story about, having that portfolio career. And when you mentioned, some people come in for their baby checks, it took me all the way back to when I brought my daughter in for her first checkups, and the emotion and just how good it felt and how excited the GP was with us and all of that. And one of the things I'm really big on, and the reason why I started this podcast, is because of the power of storytelling and hearing people's lived experience and what that does to us as humans and the emotions that it brings up. And just hearing that little bit and the fact that I was able to resonate with that section and the emotion that it drew up in me, it's just amazing. And I think it also helps to humanize GPs a little bit more as well, I think, because sometimes we do, a lot of people go to the GP and we don't get what we want sometimes, and we get frustrated and we just see them as, a blocker. But actually, you guys are doing such amazing things, and, it does make me personally really grateful, and I'm sure a lot of people listening as well. But before we get stuck into some more, because I definitely do have some more questions around some of the things you've just said, I wanted to kind of give people a bit of an insight into Agatha, an insight that maybe people don't usually know or find out because they just don't ask.
Oh, dear.
What is one fun thing or random thing that people don't know about you?
Oh, wow, random and fun.
It doesn't have to be fun and random. That's too.
Okay, fun or random.
Yes.
Fun or random thing. So, oh, that's a hard. Oh, it's not hard, but I'm just trying to think of what would be a good one. I mean, there's I think there's probably a few random things about me. I think I enjoy doing out of the box things sometimes, and so like for example, a group of my friends and I go and do the Color Rush run every few years. Oh my gosh! So it's an obstacle course. But it's all inflatables and there's like colored paint and it's just crazy and we just go around it and just bounce but I think there's something it's just that freedom and that laughter and that childlikeness. I mean, last time they had those, you know, those space ball things that used to jump on in nursery and we were on those. God, it's really embarrassing. But it's great, and we'll dress up and you'll wear colored tutus and colored leg warmers and yeah, I'll send you a picture later, you'll laugh. But it's about living. It's about living. I mean, there's a bit of a backstory to that in terms of one of my best friends passed away in 2013 suddenly, and she really lived. She really enjoyed life. She used to just do things and take opportunities. And I think it's after that that myself and the other friends thought, you know what? Yeah, you know, life is for living. Let's do this. And we see something like, that's great. Let's go and do it. And we just kind of go off and do those things. So one of the fun things that we enjoy, we stopped doing it obviously during COVID. But yeah, they do it. I think they do it in different parts of England once a year in the spring. And we tend to go and do that. Yeah, also dressed up as a superhero for Comic-Con, another thing that we just did. You know, it's just like, let's go. So yeah, just fun. I think it's really important to inject fun into your life.
Definitely, especially in the career that you have as well. I think, you know, that it comes with ups and downs, doesn't it? And there can be some things that happen that are quite mentally and emotionally draining. So having that outlet is so important. I don't know why, but like, I am active. I do go to the gym, but just imagining bouncing on those balls make me tired because that's exercise.
It was, and yeah, it is. And I have started going to the gym now, so hopefully it'll be easier. But but it's exercise. You ache after, but it's so much fun. And even the bouncy castles, like, you know, well, you kind of run. It's a 5K run, but we tend to end up doing more than that because we go back. Shh, don't tell anyone. We go back and go on the obstacles again. So, you know, and afterwards there's a big, you know, when you do your circuit, the team, the people that you went round with, there's a big celebratory thing at the end, and we all throw colored paint, and it's great fun. And it's all washable and edible stuff, so it's not, you know, it's not toxic or anything. But yeah, we have fun. I think that's one of the randoms. I'm sure there's many randoms about me though.
I love it. You also mentioned that you sing as well. Do you still do that?
Not as much as I'd like to. I really do miss that actually. My son is a singer, so I live through him. He was a drummer in an indie band, and he's also does some solo stuff. He did a music degree. And so I go to his gigs and I live through him. But I loved that, and I think it, even through like studying and everything, it balanced my mind, the singing and the performing arts. I did hijack my sister's wedding 2017 and jumped in with the band, and we did a bit there, and actually went on holiday last year, 2024 now, and found the because it was in Greece, and we've actually found the lead person from the band, and he was like, come along, I play at this club, this restaurant, come and join me. And so we did a set at his restaurant, I think, which was I think he had pre-warned the management that I was coming, but it was quite funny because he was like, yeah, just jump on the stage, we'll do something together, and we did a few songs. So I do love it, and I really do miss it. I think there's something about that's always kind of part of you, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely amazing. So we talked about what led you to becoming a GP, but your role now is so vast. Can you talk us through kind of how you found yourself where you are today? So from becoming a GP to now being involved in so much for the NHS, how did that come about?
So I'd say by accident. I think, yeah, it's kind of, one thing has kind of led to another in that way. So I think early on in my career as a GP, while I was a GP trainer, I was lucky enough to have a trainee. I was lucky enough to have a trainer who was very much involved in the local healthcare system. So in where we lived. So at that point, there was kind of GPs surgeries coming together as federations, and then eventually those then became, they kind of changed the commissioning model, so it became very primary care led, so clinical commissioning groups where clinicians were at the forefront, and all of that was happening. And my trainer happened to be the chair or the lead for the federations that then kind of morphed gradually over, and then became one of the medical directors at the CCG, or the chair of the CCG, I believe, at the time. And so where I did my homework, he allowed me to follow him to things, and so I did. I used to go to all these meetings that were about actually how services were going to be structured and how services were funded and how things were being designed and developed, and that just opened my eyes to the bigger system. And it was a case of you can do so much with individuals in front of you, and as a GP you may see 30, 40 people plus a day, so you can impact on all those people if you multiply that by the number of days in the week and how many days you work. But actually, when you're looking at whole systems, you can impact on whole populations and whole communities and then really improve care. I took an interest in that, and obviously through my training and through my work, I was lucky enough to be able to operate in different areas as well. So obviously I was a GP, but I also did some out of hours. I did some urgent care centre work, and obviously within the community and things like that. So again, you start to learn about different bits of the system. So after I finished my training, I decided to apply for a Darzi fellowship, and that is it's still running actually. It's a program for future leaders in healthcare. Initially, it was very doctor-based, but it became multidisciplinary. So lots of different healthcare people coming into that program, and in that you were placed with a service or an organisation. So I was placed with NHS South West London, and you also, as part of it, did a postgraduate certificate in clinical leadership. And that just opened my eyes even more, because actually I was part of some of those changes now happening, and part of those conversations. And again, just seeing that whole system element. From there, I took on a role within the CCG as a clinical lead. And I think what happens is you do something and then you do it well, and therefore then you start doing other things, and then you start doing other things, and you start being involved in other things. And so my remit and my portfolio grew, because I was and I was leading on cardiology, I was leading on urgent care, the 111 service was new, so I was supporting that from a commission perspective. And then I went to this meeting around urgent care in London because of my role at the CCG, and a very as a GP that I had a bit of a I want to be you when I grow up type GP, who was a clinical lead in one of the areas as well. And she's a lot older than me, but she's somebody who I have a lot of respect for. And she said, "Oh, there's a job going at the ambulance service. Are you going to apply for it?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, why not? And if she says I can do it, of course I can do it." So I applied for it and got that. And so I led, I was an assistant medical director at London Ambulance Service for a number of years, and then led on and, I designed and implemented and then led on their 111 service, which now covers a lot of London, and run that for 7 years through COVID. And just in that, again, if you do something well, you build a reputation, and you interact in a role like that. It's a pan-London organisation. You have to build those interfaces and those relationships wider than your organisation. So in that, I've obviously built a lot of relationships. And then obviously it gets to a point, you've done something for 7 years. It was very intense. It was one of the best things I ever did, because I learned a lot in that role, and I think got to achieve a lot, or myself and my team got to achieve a lot, from, if we look at how that service was at the beginning and what it's become. But I think there was a time where I had to stop just because it was, you can't do that. It's not sustainable to do that for a longer time. And then this role came up, and it was like, oh, I'll just apply for that then. Just thought, this is back to where I came from. This is primary care. And actually, there aren't very many GPs that have worked for example, in an ambulance service or in other bits of so many bits of the system, and I've only named a few, but actually being able to bring that whole system understanding and that interface understanding of, how do we interact with other services, how do our people, the patients, the people that we're looking after, flow through all these services, how does what I do in my bit of the system impact on the other bit, and vice versa, bringing that whole system knowledge back in and saying, okay, now primary care is in a position where it's quite overwhelming. We're struggling. There's a lot. There's the staff morale is low. There's access. Although we're providing more appointments than ever, there's access issues. So how do we? We're in a process of transformation, I'd say, in primary care. So being in this role and then being able to bring all of that in and support that and lead from a Pan London perspective has been. I mean, that it's an actual privilege to be able to do that. And as a jobbing GP, to hopefully do something that's going to impact on me and my colleagues on the ground, and actually help us to do what we've always wanted to do, which is actually to be able to provide care for the population that we serve. So it's kind of been one thing led to another. I've never really been looking for a job, or it's almost like things have happened at the right time, and they've just and opportunities have presented themselves, and I've kind of gone for those.
Amazing. So one of the things that you said, I think for me, like, key takeaways from what you've said for anyone listening is the power of working in different areas. So some of us get there's always this emphasis on people to choose a niche and to focus on one area and to specialize in one area, but you've really just given evidence for, and I think almost provided a testimonial for, actually sometimes it is good to just spread yourself out and to really gain an understanding of loads of different areas, so that you can, like you said, be almost that source of knowledge of so many different things to really then add value to the area that you move into. So I think firstly, for anyone listening that's kind of at the point where they're thinking, I don't really know what I want to do, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think Agatha's journey is testament to that. I think the other thing that you said that was really powerful was about having someone that you admire believe in you and encourage you, because that can't be, you can't ever undervalue that. Like the lady that saw you and said, have you applied for that ambulance role? If you hadn't had that encouragement from her, you probably never would have gone for it. And look at the impact that you managed to have in that role. So I think that for me is more of a call to action to people in senior positions or in positions where they can influence, inspire, encourage, advance, mentor, etc. People coming up behind them is, the power is in your hands, and definitely grab hold of it with both hands, because you don't know what you could be doing for someone's life and for their career.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm also really big on, because I've told this story a few times on this podcast, but I have brain fog from chemotherapy, right? So I struggled to take some information in. And one of the things that you said, because I'm always really big on, if I don't get it, then there must be somebody else that doesn't get it. And we've spoken about it already, and you've given me the insight. But for anyone listening that doesn't understand what primary care is, could you just articulate that?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, it's just an
Okay.
assumption, isn't it? No, you're absolutely right. So primary care is it's kind of your first contact services. So it'll be your general practice. So when people say primary care, they use it interchangeably with general practice, that your GP practice. But it's not just general practice. It's optometry, so opticians, eye tests, dentistry, and it's pharmacy as well as general practice. And that's your primary care. These are your services that you go to. They're not secondary. You don't get referred to them by anyone. You go to those services, and they provide that primary layer of care for you. So that's primary care.
Thank you so much.
No,
and you've just reminded me, actually, because I wanted to shout out your parents, because I'm not being funny. A GP or a doctor, a pharmacist, a dentist, and did you say an actor?
No, a film producer, TV producer.
Film TV producer. Like, talk about success.
Thank you.
Listen, if my mum
really humble,
mum would be like, you see, look, what are you children doing? Look at Agatha and her siblings. Look what they've done. absolutely phenomenal. Like massive shout out.
Thank you.
Now, I mentioned earlier that like you are one of the few Black GPs that I know. I've never personally had a Black GP. And as part of this podcast, one of the things that I'm also keen to do is to talk about some of the barriers that currently exist in different fields, in different sectors, and look at ways for organizations and individuals to overcome those barriers. So what would you, from your perspective, what would you say, or what do you think some of the barriers have been that have led to such a shortage of Black GPs?
So I don't know. Is there? Well, I think we probably have to look at the number. I don't know if there's a shortage. I kind of quite a lot of Black GPs. I think I think it's difficult. I suppose some of it, well, it's representation, isn't it? Definitely. I would say there's a lot of Black GPs working in general practice. Whether there's a lot of Black GPs or Black people in these clinical leadership roles, I'd probably say is when being out there in that regard.
Yeah.
I think some of the barriers, some of it is representation, and as I said, if you've never seen one, or for young people, if you've never seen yourself in a particular role, you've never seen someone who looks like you in a particular role, how does that impact on you considering yourself for that role? So, I had a dad that said, you will be a doctor. So that was fine. But actually, not everybody's parents will tell them and actually we shouldn't. My kids, none of them are doctors. My son is a musician. My daughter is doing film and theatre. So they've both gone the art route. But actually, it's got to be something that people want to do. But actually, before you want to do it, there's got to be some consideration that you could. And I think, if we're not being seen and we're not out there, then that's something that we need to address. I mean, there's a Society of Black Women in Health and Black female doctors as well. So there's lots of societies where we see each other and we support each other. I think where the barriers really are around how we progress within our organizations into these kind of leadership roles. And oftentimes, I think we spoke about it before, my issue is when I go into meetings, I'm the only one. I'm the only Black face or the only Black female face. And I think there's something about how we firstly encourage ourselves to go for these things, because actually this is where you get to have a say in what happens and how services are then developed and how the healthcare system is developed and moves forward, but also being representative of our population in that way. And supporting that decision making. But there will be barriers to how we're perceived and how what's the word, how those opportunities present, and also what access is given to those opportunities. So when we go and we do put ourselves forward, what is the output of that? And oftentimes there's a disproportionate output, where actually it's not us who are selected. And so I think we need to look at, and that's played out in, there's a lot of the NHS organisations have to put forward RES data, so that's workforce race equality standards data, and it looks at I'll say global majority people, so not just Black people, but all people from the global majority, at different bandings, different levels, so pay levels within organisations, and you see that as the banding goes up, the diversity comes down around race. So there's definitely something at play. And I think what we need to do is be open and honest about that and some of the barriers. And some of the I think very few of the barriers are about the individuals, because most of the time people overqualify themselves and do lots of courses and lots of programs to try and push them, to do that. But there's other barriers and other things at play that prevent that progression. And I think we need to look inwardly as organizations across the NHS and across I think it will probably be in other sectors as well, and understand why we do that. I think the personal barrier, and I'll call this out myself because I've done it and I still do, is the feeling, and there's some truth to it in some way, but I think sometimes we also allow it to stop us, that we have to work 10 times harder. So I would say the truth to it is that because of those barriers, you need to be seen. And in order to be seen, because it's not natural for you to be seen in those roles or those positions, you do have to do things and do them well. And be, I think I tweeted it once, or I posted it once, saying that you've got to be top of your game at all times, because actually if the choice is between you and someone else, it has to be absolutely unrefutable as to why it was you.
Yeah.
And you've got to be in a position where people are, where's Agatha? Agatha should be involved. Agatha's, she should be involved in this. Where is she? We value her opinion. People have to, it almost has to be that people have to expect that you're there because you're the subject matter expert or whatever it is. But that's really tiring.
Yeah.
I think that then causes a lot of internal damage to us because we're always, it's not sustainable. So we need to, although we do have to work, we do have to work harder to some extent. I think sometimes we put that on ourselves so much that we then try and become something we're not.
Yeah.
And actually, how do we create an environment where we can be ourselves and we can show our excellence, and our excellence can be seen and appreciated and recognized.
Yeah.
And it may not look or sound or feel the same way as what people have defined excellence to be.
Yeah.
There is excellence. And it brings something completely different that actually without that diversity you wouldn't have seen, or you wouldn't have, it wouldn't have come up. So I think we've got to start to change that narrative, but it's got to be on both sides. I think we put a lot on ourselves, and I do it a lot because I'm the only person. I always feel like I have to be perfect, and I'm really hard on myself, and I give myself, I have extremely high standards for myself. And it's not sustainable. And I think we need to be kinder to ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't be strong all the time. We can't be superwoman all the time. We have to just be and trust and know that we're here for a reason and we know what we're doing, and do it.
Absolutely.
And do it well. But also people need to adjust their thinking a little bit around, you don't have to look, sound and be a particular way to be seen to be good at what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Waffled, or if that made sense.
No, that's perfect. There's a couple of things you said that really stood out again for me. And one of them was around, the fact that so many Black GPs. I think that again in itself is really powerful to call out, because again, I can obviously only speak from my lived experience and what I've seen. But I think the other thing that you said that was really powerful is just around the visibility piece.
Yeah.
But we only see what we see, right? And there's more that needs to be done around giving that visibility so that people can see that this is a career that you can succeed in and you can access, but similarly one that you can progress in, and starting to see that representation at senior levels is going to be really, really powerful. And I know the NHS are doing a lot of work around diversification, and like you said, the report that they need to submit, etc. So it really shows that there is ambition to get there. We just need to do a lot more work around overcoming the current kind of barriers to that. And then the other thing,
some of that, sorry, go on.
No, you go.
Yeah, and I was going to say, some of that has to be moving away from a deficit model, in terms of we must give these people more training. We must give these people more, yes, we do need mentoring. Yes, we do need coaching, but everybody does. But what we need is the access to the same, things, but not to say, well, actually, we need to do something extra for them because they're not good enough and they need that something extra. It's more a case of, what do we need to do around our organizational structures and processes? What do we need to do about ourselves that actually allows that true equity of opportunity? Sorry, I did cut you there.
That was such a powerful point. I'm always going on about mentoring and sponsorship, and it's true. People from marginalized backgrounds don't necessarily know how to access mentorship and sponsorship. And I think it's really powerful to shout that out, is that actually that is usually what's needed, is the support to access those things so that they can get the access
all the
to
ability.
Exactly.
And they've got the talent and they've got the skills. There's nothing wrong with people's talent and skills. They are good enough, but actually they're not necessarily having the support to do things, and actually the belief that they can, and that, as you said, she said to me, you could do it, and I was like, oh. And I think it is not only having those people telling you can do it, but believing them, because sometimes you don't see in yourself what you're capable of. And someone else calls it out to you, like, oh wow, I must be doing something right for somebody to. So I think again, it's what we can do, those of us in leadership positions, if we see something good in someone, how we can encourage that, and how we can tell them how, what we see, and enable them and empower them to start to move forward and to access things.
Absolutely. And a lot of what I do in my work is trying to get organizations to understand the impact that diversity can have on what their business looks like from the top down, right? And one of the things that I'm always trying to hammer home is cultural differences and how those present. And you mentioned about, you know, the need to kind of get to grips with excellence looks different for everyone, right? And for me, it's so important for organizations to appreciate that culturally excellence looks different to everyone. And only in doing the work around your understanding of equality and diversity as an organization and what you want to commit to in terms of creating an inclusive workforce, only then can you create an environment where you appreciate and understand what each culture does, how they present, and what excellence looks like in those cultures. And I think having access to stories like yours is so important. It's just even understanding that perspective of, you know, culturally, you know, people from West Africa in particular are traditionally brought up to feel like and explicitly told, you need to work twice as hard, right? And you need to make sure that you keep your head down and, you know, you stay out of trouble and you are the best and this, that, and the other, and how that then presents in the workplace, but also the impact that that can have on the mental health of Black women in some environments because of that need to be perfect and that overworking yourself and overexposing yourself because you know that in order to be seen or to progress, you've got to go twice as hard as everybody else. And I think for organizations having that understanding, they will then be able to engage with those populations to understand what they need to do to make things fairer and more equitable. And also just calling out what you said as well, that again is really powerful, but also it's kind of common sense, but, you know, not everyone gets it, is that people from marginalized backgrounds that work in particular sectors, you know, that are sectors that require you to be skilled, have the skills and sometimes are overqualified. So it's not about to be equitable, to be, you know, create equality here, we need to give them more training. No, they've got plenty of it.
And we don't need to drop our standards either, because
No,
that's the argument. We need to make it easier for them.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes the misconception when we talk about equity and equality is, oh, but that means, you know, you're only getting the job because you're Black or because you're brown. No, they have the core skills, right? So the essential criteria that's in a job description, best believe they've got all of that. But what they now need is the access and the opportunities, the mentorship, the sponsorship, the recognition, and, you know, just the appreciation of the cultures that they come from, etc., and how that can contribute to the environment they're in, but also the barriers that can sometimes create.
Yeah. And when they come to the interview or whatever it is, they're actually to be heard and to be understood.
Absolutely.
Because again, people will articulate, and some of it isn't even about where we were born or where we were raised. There's all kinds of subcultures around things as well, isn't it? In terms of, you know, I don't know where you're from. I'm from West Africa, so that really resonates with what you said. Exactly. But we'll have things that make us very different as well. So I think there's something about, you know, when we present ourselves or we apply or whatever, maybe the words that I might choose to use or the examples that I might choose to use may not be typical, just because maybe my experiences have been different, or because of how I choose to, you know, talk about it might be different, or, you know, the way I choose, you know, there's people that kind of are very bullet pointed, and there's people that like to give a lot of story and a lot of fluff, and actually that then impacts on how you're listened to and how you're heard and what is interpreted from what you've said. So I think it's almost diversity will enrich the team. And actually people who think differently, who operate differently, who have different ideas or different ways of managing information are useful and will make the team, you know, if everyone kind of behaves or thinks in the same way, that's not going to necessarily bring the best out of the team. So even when we're looking for people, if we've got an idea in mind of what a, you know, director of this or whatever looks like and behaves like, and someone comes in that doesn't look and behave like that, we need to be able to open our minds and hear them, because actually what we may find is those skills and those that what we require from the human that does that role is there.
Yeah.
But because it didn't present itself in the way that, and it wasn't packaged in the way that we expected it, we may not hear it. We may not even pick up some of those points. So yeah, I think there's work to be done on that side as well. And yeah, it goes a bit beyond all the bias training. It's slightly different to that. It's about just being a bit more open and not assuming, and just taking things at face value and then deciding based on that, rather than already having an idea or making assumptions.
Absolutely. Agatha, thank you so much. Now, I always like to end these episodes with kind of calls to action or recommendations that you'd give. So what would you say or advise anyone thinking of a career in medicine or leadership in the medical field?
I would say go for it. We need you. We need as many people as we can. I would say, just do it. It's possible. Probably find someone who's already in that field to talk to, just so you understand more about it. I think it's important to have a bit of life experience as well. And a lot of it is academia, but actually, particularly as a doctor, a lot of it is just about being a good human being and someone who can interact with people and understand, and some emotional intelligence and all of that. So I think, again, it's all those wider skills that we need to consider. But I would say, if people are interested in doing healthcare or doing healthcare leadership, it's really important. Don't be too hard on yourself as well. I think I learned that the hard way, and I'm trying to be a bit better and a bit kinder to myself. But I think it's really important that that work-life balance element is absolutely key, and that well-being element is absolutely key. And even within your job, within your role, you need colleagues, you need people that you can bounce off and offload things with. You need outside of work time. You need to do fun things like Colour Rush and crazy stuff like that. You need to do things to balance and to create that work-life balance.
Excellent. And then the other question is, what would your call to action be for anyone leading people from the global majority in medicine or any other field? If you're leading someone from a diverse background, what would your call to action be?
I would say, don't assume that just because you provide, just because it's equal doesn't mean it's equal. And I think that brings us to the equality and equity conversation. So my door is always open. That doesn't mean the same thing for different people. So if someone doesn't push on that open door, don't assume that it's because they didn't want to, or they weren't interested enough, or they're not motivated. Or speak to them. Speak to them and understand, because their cultural makeup or the way that they operate they might just be nervous to do that because you're so senior and it's a bit scary. So I think there's something about not assuming. I think if you see positivity and talent in someone, call it out and encourage them and give them positive feedback. I think we don't really necessarily do that enough. Also, there are people in our in senior positions that are intimidated by talent in other people, and we need to stop that right now. We need to, if we've moved up in our career, we need to make that ladder, and we need to make sure that we're giving opportunities for other people. We're supporting, we're mentoring, we're coaching, or we're signposting people to those who can do that if that's not our makeup. But absolutely do not kick down that ladder. There's not enough of us to do that. So I think it's really important to create that pipeline and to provide that support. That's what we need to do. That's our legacy, is that we need to make sure that we allow people to access opportunities. We open doors for them, we expose them to things, and we expose them to those possibilities, and we provide that support and that guidance where they need it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Agatha. I've really enjoyed this episode. I think it's going to be a really powerful one for anyone that just is looking for a beacon of encouragement and representation, particularly in the medical field. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your transparency and your candidness. Really, really appreciate it.
No worries at all. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
My pleasure.
This podcast is brought to you by Acquaintance Consulting. We'd love it if you could take a minute at the end of this podcast to follow, subscribe, whichever is easier or available for you on the platform that you're listening to us on. We're really keen to grow this channel and really impact equality, diversity and inclusion across the world. And with your support, we can do just that.